Before we get started in the Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good evening, afternoon. We're continuing with our study of the Dhammapada. We are in chapter 5, the full of Balavagga, verse 67. Verse 67. So as usual, recite the verse, give the story behind the verse, and my commentary. It's a pretty short verse and short story, so hopefully we can get through it in a decent amount of time. So verse 67 goes, "That deed is not well done when, after having done it, one regrets, and when weeping with tearful face, one reaps the fruit thereof." Again, that deed is not well done when, after having done it, one regrets, and when weeping with tearful face, one reaps the fruit thereof. This verse was given to the conclusion of an incident that happened. The incident was when a group of thieves, or robbers, had stolen a whole bunch of money and treasures and artifacts from a rich house. And they went into a farmer's field to split up all the winnings, right? And one of the thieves, while they're in the house, had found kind of like a small purse of precious gems and had stuck it into their robe or into their clothes. But as they were in the field and they were counting out, all the monies and treasures, that little purse had fallen out from the pocket of the thief, and so it was left behind. And so that morning, or the next morning, I guess, when the Buddha had awoken, typically what the Buddha would do every morning is, during meditation, he would kind of use his Buddha mind to kind of see into the world and find opportunities where people's mind was ripened enough for enlightenment, and so that he would be able to go and help those individuals. And this morning, he had seen that the farmer of where those thieves had been counting their money was due for enlightenment. There's a specific verse I haven't written down, but there's kind of a quote that the Buddha had said when he had seen this farmer kind of ready to be enlightened. He was going to be a Sotapadana, stream enterer, that very day. And so he took Ananda with him and had walked past the farm. And the farmer had seen the Buddha, and he came out to the Buddha and kind of bowed and paid respects to the Buddha and Ananda. And the Buddha had walked off with Ananda. And as the Buddha was walking away, he had noticed the little purse of gems in the middle of the field. And he told Ananda, "Look at that very poisonous snake." And Ananda looks at this purse of gems and said, "Venerable sir, indeed that is a very poisonous snake." And so the farmer overheard this and was intrigued. He was like, "There's a poisonous snake in my field," right? Because he's plowing away, and he was like, "I need to investigate this." So he goes and investigates and finds out that this is a purse filled with gems. And so he takes it and hides it. He buries it or something, but he basically takes it, right, and hides it away. In the meantime, the householder that all the treasures were stolen from, it was with the authorities, and they were out searching, right? And so they were able to find the footprints of all the thieves going from the rich man's house into the field of the farmer, and saw that it kind of wandered off and concluded that the farmer was one of the thieves, and so took him in and beat him, and was taking him to the king. And apparently the reward for stealing is death at the time. So he was sentenced to death. But as the guards were taking this farmer to be sentenced or to be put to death, the farmer just started to recite the very same verse that the Buddha and Ananda had said to each other. "Ananda, look at that very poisonous snake. Indeed, Venerable sir, that is a very poisonous snake." So he would repeat this over and over again. And so the guards were confused. Like, what is he saying? Why does he keep repeating this verse of the Buddha and Ananda's conversation? And so they thought that the guards thought that the farmer was trying to use the Buddha as a witness. And so they took him back to the king and told the king what they had heard and asked the farmer, "What are you saying? What are you reciting?" And he told the story of the Buddha and Ananda saying that they had seen a poisonous snake. So the king was intrigued. He was like, "You know what? Let's go double check on this information." And so they went to the Buddha and asked him if this was indeed the situation. And the Buddha had confirmed that indeed that is exactly what had happened. And so the king essentially pardoned the farmer. And this is when the verse was given. This is when the Buddha gave that verse. And again, that verse is, "That deed is not well done when after having done it, one regrets, and when weeping with tearful face, one reaps the fruit thereof." Of course, this is the Pali way of the translation, at least the direct translation. The direct translation of the Pali is just essentially saying that an action is not a good one if after you've already performed the action, that it causes you to suffer, to regret, to have remorse, right? Because even at the time of your action, right, you think of it as being a good idea that would, even if it brings you a momentary, temporary satisfaction, but later on causes you to be regretful of your actions, causes you to be remorseful, causes you to be in suffering, then it's not a very good action after all, right? If you're regretting it afterward, it's not a very good action. Even in the moment of doing it, you thought it was a good idea. So the verse, the Buddha is trying to emphasize our ethical reflection and the importance of the wise, skillful actions that we need to take. That it teaches us that an action is not truly good or skillful if it leads to that remorse, to that regret, to that suffering after it's already been performed. So if we kind of break down the verse here, and the very beginning of the verse where it says the deed is not well done, right? And this opening verse itself challenges the idea that success is determined It challenges the idea that success is only determined by outcomes or appearances. That a deed may seem beneficial in the moment or provide short-term satisfaction, but if the result causes us to suffer, to regret, or to have remorse, then it's not a good deed after all, spiritually, karmically, from a karmic or spiritual perspective or standpoint. The next few lines, when after having done it, one regrets, or sometimes we'll see in some translations as one repents, right? This is kind of giving us that the genuine goodness in our actions is measured not only by the intention, but also by the emotional and karmic consequences that it brings. That if we feel ashamed or we feel guilty or disturbed by your actions, then this indicates that that action is unwholesome, right? And then the last part of the verse is when weeping with tearful face, one reaps the fruit thereof. This, of course, refers again back to the karmic ripening or consequences of our unwholesome actions. That actions that are rooted in ignorance, greed, and anger can produce future suffering, both in this life and future lives. So it's kind of a reminder of our karmic consequences of our actions. That just because something feels good in the moment, or feels beneficial in the moment, or seems like a good idea in the moment, doesn't mean it's going to bring good results, right? That, of course, we know that when we commit thought, speech, and actions, that one of the main factors of the weight of karma behind that is intention, right? Chitana, intention. Because intention in Buddhism is central to the ethics of the Dharma. But this verse also reminds us to observe how our actions resonate with our conscience over time. Because if in this case, at least when we're speaking of remorse over our actions, regret is seen as a sign of misalignment, right, between actions and the inner wisdom that we have. Because if you sit there and you contemplate, is this a good thing? Is this going to be helpful? Is it going to be beneficial to myself or to others, right? This is where we need to really practice mindful decision making, right? Because that way, in the moment, you can ask yourself, will I feel good about this afterward? Will this bring benefit or happiness or freedom to myself and to others? Right? Is this beneficial? That's the question we always ask. That's the question we should always ask ourselves when we're making decisions. Is this helpful to me or to others? Is this will this cause pain to myself or to others? Right? Because as a practitioner, as a mindfulness practitioner, as a dharmic practitioner, right, it's not always just about us. Yeah, we're here to try to enlighten yourself because you have to become enlightened yourself in order to help others become enlightened, right? So there's an aspect of worrying about yourself in a way, but holistically, right, your practice is also to help others. It's to also be compassionate and to be genuine and to be generous with others. This includes the thoughts, speech, and actions that you do in life. So if we at least practice that mindful decision making, then we have some sort of protection, right? For ourselves and for others. This is why we have, this is kind of one of the purposes of mantras, right? A mantra is seen as some powerful statement, right, that kind of protects the practitioner, protects the one that is reciting the mantra. So the mantra itself doesn't really have any power necessarily, right? It's not like a magic spell that's going to create or do something in the world, But because there is a intended benefit behind the mantra, that when you recite the mantra with that intention of what the mantra is representing, it helps you see clearly what is happening. So when we're invoking the names of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, we're not trying to bring their spirits to the present here, right? Because they're long gone. They don't care about you wanting them to be here, right? They have better things to do than worrying about a bunch of people invoking them into the temple. No. The reason why we recite and invoke the names of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is so that when we are in this mindful practice and we're reciting the name Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, we're invoking within ourselves the characteristics of the Buddha Shakyamuni. Because what does the Buddha Shakyamuni represent? Enlightenment, freedom from suffering, right? Compassion, generosity, loving kindness, equanimity, right? Concentration, wisdom. These are the characteristics. These are the factors of the Buddha, the qualities of the Buddha that we want to instill within ourselves. And so when we're invoking their name, this is what we're trying to cement in our mind what we want to become too. Same thing with all the other bodhisattvas. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, right? Presents great compassion, great loving kindness. And so we use them, especially in moments of difficulty, in moments of anger, in moments of hatred, right? Or ignorance. We invoke Avalokiteshvara's name to instill within ourselves the qualities of compassion, the qualities of patience, the qualities of deep listening. Because if you think about it, when someone's yelling at you, right? And when you're in an argument, we're not really thinking about the other person necessarily. All we're thinking is that they're yelling at us, that they're arguing, that they're, trying to put you down or trying to cause trouble or issues or whatever it may be. We're not really thinking about what they're going through. We're not really recognizing that they too are suffering, and their means of voicing the suffering is through yelling or through hitting or through whatever drama they're causing, right? We don't see that. But if you can sit in that moment and be mindful and bring up the invocation of Avalokiteshvara, then you can remind yourself of the qualities of what we're trying to actually develop within ourselves. Quality of patience that allows you to sit and listen to this person yell at you. Because sometimes when people are yelling, they just need to vent, right? It's not necessarily that they're trying to be rude or be mean or to try to put you down. It's just because they don't know any other way to do it. So they yell, they throw things, right? They make assumptions or tell lies or whatever it may be, right? This is just their way because they are ignorant. This is their way of trying to relieve their suffering. Yes, as practitioners, we know that this is the incorrect way to do things, right? So we're not there to tell them necessarily that they're doing something wrong, but instead, we sit there with patience. We sit there with compassion. We sit there with the ability to listen to their suffering, to help them through the suffering. Because otherwise, if you just yell back and argue back, you're just feeding stupidity with stupidity. You're feeding ignorance with ignorance. You're not really helping, right? You're just feeding their negative, unwholesome qualities. But if we show them the correct qualities to hold on to, the qualities of patience and compassion and generosity, then maybe that'll flip a switch for them, right? One of the ways to act out your practice in the world isn't to go out and say, oh yeah, I'm a Buddhist. I know this, I know that, I memorize all these sutras, I memorize all these mantras, I know these teachings, I can teach you this, I can teach you that. That doesn't prove anything. What proves your practice is the actions that you do. So instead of going out and preaching about compassion, go out and be compassionate. Instead of preaching about being generous, go out and be generous. Don't sit here and say, yeah, doing volunteerism is a good thing, but then you go home and drink wine and watch TV for the rest of the night. You're not practicing what you preach. And so think of the potential consequences of our actions, right? Because actions is the hardest aspect of our karma, right? Because everything comes from thought, speech, and action, right? If you have an unwholesome thought, right? Let's just say that's like 25% negative karma. If you speak unwholesomely, that's 50%. If you do the action of unwholesome, that's 100% bad karma, right? And so we have these opportunities to be mindful at the very beginning of this kind of race, right? So if you're mindful enough, if you're aware enough of yourself, then when an unwholesome or negative thought arises, you can catch it as soon as possible before it becomes speech. Because depending on your quality of the mind, right, even when you have an unwholesome thought, you can feel regret, you can feel remorse just by thinking about it, right? Because I hope that not every once in a while, I would hope at least at one point in your life, you may have thought of something and you're like, wow, I really shouldn't have been thinking that, right? Maybe you thought about like killing someone or saying something, right? Something super dramatic, and you're like, wow, I really shouldn't be thinking that way, right? That's a good thing because you have remorse, you regret just the act of thinking, right? You haven't even said it out loud. You haven't actually done anything physically. So that's the kind of remorse that we want to feel. Because we really shouldn't feel that remorse is like this self-punishment, right? But instead we should see it as a kind of compass to guide us to correct our course, right? So instead of feeling like we should punish ourselves for thinking negatively, well, instead, like, you know what, I caught it. Just like the same way when we're in meditation and we're sitting and meditating on our object of meditation and a distraction arises, right? Or a wandering thought arises. The same feeling, that's a feeling, but the same process of catching that, right? Regardless of how long it took. Because if you're sitting in a 30-minute meditation, for instance, distraction arose, if it took you 10 seconds to catch it, that's great. If it took you a minute, that's still great. If it took you 10 minutes, still great. If it took you 29 minutes and 58 seconds to catch it before your 30-minute session ended, that's still great. It doesn't matter how long it took you to catch the thought, as long as you caught it. That is the point of meditation. So likewise, even if we're thinking negatively or unwholesomely, as long as you realize that you thought something unwholesome or negative, that's what counts, right? So that's your kind of first checkpoint. But if you're unfortunate and not mindful enough, then if the thought slips through and becomes speech, right? You still have time to kind of correct yourself. Whether you stop yourself mid-sentence, whether you stop yourself the moment your mouth opens, or even after you've said it, right? We can still feel regret or remorseful. Sometimes we'll say things out of the heat of the moment. We're like, oh, probably shouldn't have said that, right? Or you're like me when you go on tangents, and I sometimes don't catch myself. I will say stupid things. But that's your second checkpoint. Then, if you continue to be unmindful and unaware of your thoughts and speech, then that speech can potentially turn into action. So if you're in an argument, and you're thinking negative things, and you're saying negative things to this person, and it has a potential of turning into physical, right? And start to like hit this person, beat this person, or do other stupid things. And then what? Maybe you end up being beat. Maybe you end up going to jail. Maybe you end up in the hospital. And after a while, you're like, wow, I probably shouldn't really have said anything or did anything. Because who wants to go to jail? Who wants to be in the hospital? Nobody. I hope, right? If you're a psychopath, you want to go to jail. But nobody typically wants to go to jail or wants to end up being in the hospital because they got beat. And then there's regret behind that, right? Nobody wants to feel that. And so instead of allowing that entire thought, speech, and action to cause regret, right, down the road, down the line, try to catch that as soon as possible. That way you don't have to go through all that suffering. Of course, in the regular world, right, it's difficult to attempt to gauge consequences of our actions, right? Because we truly don't really know what karmically, from a karmic standpoint, what our actions will reap into. But even when we attempt to use logic sometimes, right, it may not be enough. And so one of the other things we can rely on other than logic is experience, right? Because as young or as old as we may be, we've all experienced moments of when we thought, said, or did things that we later regretted, right? And we can see how much suffering this causes us. Because even now, even if you've done or said something years ago, the consequences of that regret still lingers on, right? Maybe you said or did something in a relationship that caused the relationship to ruin. Maybe you did or said something in a job that caused your job to be lost, or the relationship to end, or the friendship to end, right? We hang on to those regrets. We hang on to those remorseful moments for years, sometimes even decades. So that should give you some sort of motivation to not want to repeat that cycle over and over again. Because if you're still hanging on to something that happened years ago, the suffering isn't because of the action that it was caused, but because you're holding on to it still. You're holding on to something that is making you feel hurt or regretful, and just hoping one day it'll go away. But hoping that it'll go away isn't going to make it go away, right? The only way, at least from Buddhist perspective, to let go of something that is regretful is to acknowledge that something regretful was done, right? And so in Buddhism, we have the act of repentance, not because we want the Buddha or the Bodhisattvas to forgive us, right? Because they're not here to forgive us. They're not going to bless you. They're not going to erase your bad karma. The act of repentance in Buddhism is to acknowledge to ourselves that we had thought, said, and did misdeeds that caused negative, unwholesome karma to be sown. And that we make a promise to ourselves that we would not do this again. That in the future, when we're in a situation, that we will not repeat the act of thought, speech, or action in that same unwholesome manner. That is what repentance is. So if you did something in the past that caused you to regret, or you still feel bad about it, repent. Let it go. Acknowledge that it was done. There's nothing you can change about it. But just like the farmer, right? The reason why he hid the jewels in the first place is because some part of him, even though he knew those treasure was not his, and he knew, even from the Buddha's own mouth, said this was a poisonous snake. What happens when a poison snake bites you? Potentially die. So he knew that this money was going to potentially bring him some negativity. But yet he still went and hid it, because a part of him still wanted that. A part of him wanted to see what would happen if he kept this money. And that's kind of a parable to why we hang on to regrets, why we hang on to decisions that we made in the past, because we are waiting for something to potentially happen out of it. But all you're going to do is get poisoned. All it's doing, it's acting as poison, right? And we know the longer the poison stays in your system, the worse you're going to get, right? There's no poison that the longer you have it, the better you're going to feel, or the better the situation is going to be. Use my favorite mantra. It is what it is. There's no point of hanging on to regrets. The only benefit of feeling regretful and remorse is to acknowledge that something negative or unwholesome was done, and you have the acknowledgement that you do not want it to happen again. Because why would you want to repeat suffering? You have to be really stupid to want to repeat suffering over and over again. I'm using the literal word of stupid here instead of ignorant, because as we know, ignorance in Buddhism just literally means to not know, not knowing the true reality of things. But I'm going to admonish you to even further and say stupid in the literal stupidity, because you have to be truly stupid in order to want to repeat your own suffering, knowing that's causing you suffering, knowing that it caused you suffering before, but you're going to do it again. This isn't ignorance. This is clear stupidity. It's addiction, yes. Because the very first time you do something that causes suffering, that's truly ignorance, right? Of not knowing. But to repeat it again, to do it again, that's a special kind of stupid, right? And a lot of times when we hang on to that type of suffering, that knowing it brings us suffering, as Nan mentioned, is a type of addiction. It's a type of an addiction that brings this ignorant person comfort. But if you're able to see past that, to see it for what it truly is, of it not being comfortable, of it not being beneficial, that it's actually causing you to suffer, right? To see reality as it is, then that's the realization that the Buddha is trying to teach. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now. Questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yes, sir.
So just so I understand, there's a group of people robbing the house, and one of the thieves found that jewel, and nobody else saw it, so he put it in his pocket, right?
Right.
And then later, they were going to the field, it fell out of his pocket into the field. So it kind of represents his greed, right?
Right.
And so the farmer saw it, and like saw this beautiful stone, but the Buddha says it's a snake, right? So the Buddha knew the trouble that jewel would cause him if he picked it up.
Right.
He picked it up anyway, right?
Right.
He did it. And so because he was in possession of it, then he then got blamed for the whole entire thievery and was
Right.
put to death.
Right.
So just because something's beautiful, you don't necessarily want to pick it up.
Exactly. Exactly. I joke about, as monastics, we're obviously celibate, but I joke a lot about marriage, right? How marriage in itself is a trap, right? Because we see a beautiful woman or a man, and we're like, ooh, I want that. But within wanting that comes a lot of suffering. Because there's no such thing as a perfect relationship. There's no such thing as a perfect life. There's no such thing as a perfect job, perfect house, perfect friendship, perfect anything, right? But to think that there is, to think that this is something that is perfect, that will last forever, that will bring you long-lasting happiness, that in itself that will cause you to suffer. So just because something is beautiful and you want it, doesn't mean it's something you need. Doesn't mean it's something you have to have. Because if you're able to see beyond the initial desire for it and to try to see what is actually behind this desire, right? Just because you have a desire for a beautiful woman doesn't mean it's the woman that you want. That's just an external appearance, right? There's something more than that we are desiring. And that's what we have to look into. Because there's no way. Because every single one of them probably doesn't want you. So what's the point? So we have to really, truly look beyond the initial desire for something. Because if you said, I want cake, or I don't want coffee, or I don't like this, or I don't like that, this makes me comfortable, but this makes me uncomfortable. That doesn't make any sense. That's stupidity. That's true ignorance. Because it's not this that makes you uncomfortable. It's not this that makes you comfortable. You don't like this and dislike that. These are just superficial things. Comes and goes, changes, shifts. What's behind your like and dislike? What's behind your pleasure and displeasure? What's behind your comfort and discomfort? That's seeing true reality. That's seeing the insight beyond the ignorance that we have. So there's work involved, right? It's not an easy path. But what are you going to do about it? Yes, Leon.
So can you talk a little bit about the part of the story where he's repeating the mantra about the snake, right? There's a snake, there's a snake, there's a snake.
Mm-hmm.
Does that represent his remorse? How is it that his reciting the Buddha's words were enough to wake the king up to the situation? And does the king represent Buddha?
No. So it is him repeating what the Buddha and Ananda had said to each other, right? Again, quote is, Ananda, look at that very poisonous snake. And Ananda replies, Venerable Sir, yes, indeed, that is a very poisonous snake.
And the farmer heard him say this?
And the farmer heard him say this, right? And so for most people, when they're like, oh, poison snake, what did he do? Run the other way. But this farmer, instead of running the other way, went toward the poisonous snake, right? And so as he was being taken off by the guards, he's regretting, oh, I should have listened, because a poisonous snake means don't touch, don't come, right?
So his remorse, is that what caused the king to question why they were putting him to death? How did that save him from being put to death?
Well, because the guards heard him say these quotes, right? And so the guards thought that the farmer was trying to call the Buddha as a witness to his guilt or non-guilt, right? Like, oh, if Buddha is my witness, then surely they would believe me. So the king was all like, all right, well, let's go talk to the Buddha and see if your story is true. And thankfully, the king believed the Buddha, right?
So even though the farmer didn't obey the Buddha and he took the stone anyway, at least you talk about intention, maybe his intention was less and the fact that he was remorseful.
Right. I mean, he still took the jewel, right? Because again, he wanted the jewel, and he hid it, right? And so, because he got caught, right? He is essentially remorseful that he got caught, and he regretted that he hid it. So the Buddha's saying, well, this is the cause of your suffering. If you did something and you feel regret about it and remorseful, then you should have thought about it harder. Right? Again, this is what I'm saying. You have to have mindful decision making. Because if he was mindful, if he had a mindful decision at the very beginning, the farmer, then he would have never, one, gone toward this poisonous snake, and two, hid the jewels. Because again, when you're mindfully making a decision, you're asking yourself, is this helpful to me, to others? Is this beneficial to me, to others? Will this hurt me or others? Well, hello, a poisonous snake is going to be hurtful. So if he was being mindful of whether it's going to hurt him or others, then he would have never gone to this poisonous snake. Exactly. Because you're not going to find a beautiful jewel just laying down on the road, right? For the most part. That means it must belong to someone, or it fell off of something, or broke off of something. But just because it's laying on the ground doesn't mean it's yours to take.
Does it belong to the man in the house?
Right. Any other questions? Insights? All right, well, if there's no other questions, then we will transfer the merit and go to chanting. Namo Shakya Mani Buddha Namo Shakya Mani Buddha Namo Shakya Mani Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Go ahead and start. I'm going to go check that upstairs. Shakyamuni Buddha Maitreya honored future Buddha Manjushri great wisdom Bodhisattva universal great Khan Bodhisattva all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattva and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Om Eshu Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss Avalokiteshvara great compassion Bodhisattva great strength Bodhisattva Earth store great vow Bodhisattva and the assembly of great pure Bodhisattva. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear and receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. A pilgrim briefly in this world, I am grateful and joyful to hear the Lotus Sutra. How hard to be born a human egg, but I might hope to hear once more the Lotus Sutra. The Buddha moon is hidden, the son of Maitreya not yet arisen. In the long night's darkness, in between only the Lotus Sutra sheds its light. The wonderful Dharma of the Lotus Sutra. Whoever copies it, reads it, lives it, they say will be called preacher of the fivefold Dharma. With his 6 roots cleansed in the end, he who chants the Lotus Sutra is guarded by a heavenly host. He wanders the world without the Lion King. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra, Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra, Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Let's go to tab 8, page 148. 148. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Law, Chapter 26. Dharani. At the time Bodhisattva Medicine King rose from his seat, bared his right shoulder, pressed his palms together, and facing the Buddha spoke to him, saying, World honored one, if there are good men or good women who can accept and uphold the Lotus Sutra, if they read and recite, penetrate its meaning, or copy the sutra scrolls, how much merit will they gain? The Buddha said to Medicine King, if there are good men or good women who offer alms to Buddhas equal in number to the sands of 810,000 billion ayutas of Ganges, what is your opinion? The merit they gain will surely be great, will it not? Very great, world honored one. The Buddha said, if there are good men or good women who with regard to this sutra can accept and uphold even one 4-line verse, if they read and recite it, understand the principle and practice it as a sutra, it will be very many. At the time Bodhisattva Medicine King said to the Buddha, world honored one, I will now give those who preach the law dharanis, which will guard and protect them. Then he pronounced these dharanis to the assembly, world honored. These dharanis are pronounced by Buddhas equal in number to the sands of 62 million Ganges. If anyone should assault or injure these teeth of the law, then he will have assaulted and injured these Buddhas. At the time Shakyamuni Buddha praised Bodhisattva Medicine. Excellent, excellent Medicine King, you keep these teachers of the law in your compassionate thought, shield and guard them, and for that reason you pronounce these dharanis. They will bring great benefit to living beings. At the time Bodhisattva brave donor said to the Buddha, world honored one, I too will pronounce dharanis to shield and guard those who read, recite, accept, and uphold the Lotus. Teacher of the law acquires these dharanis, and although yakshas, rakshasas, putanas, pitayas, kumbhanas, or hungry spirits should spy out his shortcomings and try to take advantage of them, they will be unable to do so. Then in the presence of the Buddha he pronounced these dharanis, Shade Maha Shade Oke Moke Ade Advati Nritaya Nrityavati Itini Vitini Chitini Nityani Nityavati, world honored one. These are pronounced by Buddhas equal in number to the sands of the Ganges, and all of them respond with joy if anyone should assault or injure these teachers suffer no decline or harm within area of 100 yojanas. At the time the heavenly king, upholder of the nation, who was in the assembly, along with a host of hundreds and thousands, millions of Nayutas of Gandharvas, who surrounded him and paid him reverence, advanced to the place where the Buddha pressed his palms together and said to the Buddha, world honored one, I too will employ Dharanis to shield and guard those who Sutra. Then he pronounced these Dharanis: Agani, Gani, Gandhari, Chandali, Matangi, Chandori, Roshani, Agasti, world honored one. These Dharanis are pronounced by 42 million Buddhas. If anyone should assault or injure these teachers of the law, then he will have assault, injured these Buddhas. At the time they were daughters of Rakshasa demons, the first named Lamba, the second named Vilamba, the third named Twisted Teeth, the fourth named Flowery Teeth, the fifth named Black Teeth, the sixth named Much Hair, the seventh named Insatiable, the eighth named Necklace Bear, the ninth named Kunti, and the 10th named Sealer of Vital Spirit of all living beings. These 10 Rakshasa daughters, along with the mother of devil children, her attendants, all proceeded to the place where the Buddha was, and spoke to the Buddha in unison, saying, world honored one, we too wish to shield and guard those who read, recite, accept, and uphold the Lotus Sutra from decline or harm. If anyone should spy out the shortcomings in these teachers of the law and try to take advantage of, we will make it impossible for him to do so. Then in the presence of the Buddha, they pronounce these Dharanis: Itimi, 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 Atimi, Itimi, Nimi, 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 Rohe, 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 Sahe, 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 Sohe, Sohe. Though they climb upon our very heads, they will never trouble the teachers of the law, whether it be a yaksha or a rakshasa or a hungry spirit or a putana or a kritaya or a vidata or a skan or a numaraka or an apasamaraka or a yaksha kritaya or a human kritaya or a fever, a 1 day, a 2 day, a 3 day, a 4 day, or up to a 7 constant fever, whether it be in man's form, in woman's form, in a young boy's form, in a young girl's form. Though it be only in a dream, it will never trouble them. Then in the presence of the Buddha they spoke in verse form, saying, if there are those who fail, trouble and disrupt the preachers of the law, their heads will split into 7 pieces like the branches of the Hajaka tree. Their crime will be like that of one who kills father and mother, or one who presses out oil or cheats others with measures and scales, or like Devadatta disrupts the order of monks. Anyone who commits a crime against the seat of the law will bring on himself guilt such as this. After the Rakshasa daughters had spoken these verses, they said to the Buddha, world honored, we will use our own bodies to shield and guide those who accept, uphold, read, recite, and practice the sutra. We will see that they gain peace and tranquility, harm annulling the effect of all poison herbs. The Buddha said to the Rakshasa daughters, excellent, excellent, if you can shield and guard those who accept and uphold the mere name of the Lotus Sutra, your merit will be immeasurable. How much more so if you should those who accept and uphold it in its entirety, who offer alms to the sutra, rolls, flowers, incense, necklaces, powdered incense, paste incense, incense for burn, banners, canopies, music, who burn various kinds of lamps, lamps of butter, oil, reach this. Leon. Leon. Please go to tab 9, page 171. Part of the Prajna Paramita, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep course of Prajna Paramita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill beingness and Shariputra. Form is emptiness, emptiness. Form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in empty, there is neither form nor feelings, no perception nor mental formations or consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no attainment. The Bodhisattvas grounded in Prajna Paramita find no obstacles for their minds, having no obstacles they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. Past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth. The mantra of Prajna Paramita should there be proclaimed. Gate, gate, para, gate, para, sam, gate, bodhi, swaha, gate, gate, para, gate, para, sam, gate, bodhi, swaha, gate, 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 para, sam, gate, bodhi, swaha. Sentient beings are limitless. I vow to liberate them. Afflictions are endless. I vow to eradicate them. Teachings are infinite. I vow to learn them. Buddhahood is supreme. I vow to attain. I vow that from now until the end of my life and in all future lives, until I attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, that I will help all sentient beings in all realms of existence and their suffering. Namo Tassa, come one worthy of offerings, a proper and universal knowledge, perfect and skillful in leaving the world through liberation, perfect and complete of all worldly dharma, unsurpassed, night-taming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world-honored one. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Mahasamaprapta Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Samanta Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Great Pure Sea Light Bodhisattvas, Namo Bodhisattvas, Namo Great Pure Sea Light Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva Guarding Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva Guarding Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva Guarding Bodhisattvas. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Dwelling in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire, help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limits. We vow to share the fruits with all beings beings we vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path.